Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast and YouTube channel. I'm on a mission to help you cut the time to all the things that are holding you back so you can unleash your entrepreneur. Hey, welcome to Never Been Promoted. Hi, I'm Thomas Helfrich, your host, and I smell lovely. Not that you care, it's a podcast. I recently just got back from PondFest 2025, and I was blown away by how many people had showered and shaved. I was really expecting to go there to see a bunch of conspiracy theorists that were podcasters, and it was actually incredibly professional, and I love podcasters more than ever. They are, what a cool group. And I don't say like-minded is the right word, but they're like mission to do things to change the world, to become things. Our guest today is Cliff Tooher. It's not how it's Tooher. Tooher. I've never met a Tooher. It's kind of a fun name to say. He's all about candid conversations and no nonsense leadership advice. We'll talk to him about his journey, some of the things he's going on as an entrepreneur, struggles, what he figured out, what he hasn't. I have one small call to action as we kind of help entrepreneurs get better at entrepreneurship. The idea is to cut ties to the stuff that's holding you back, the way you think, people in your life that are just anchors and just things that you maybe believe that you probably shouldn't, and ways you do things that you probably shouldn't. I learned, and I'm gonna confess, I've actually never listened to a full podcast of somebody else. I always check out. It's a true story. And so I also didn't know, because I'm not an Apple person, that you can follow a podcast on Spotify. I think I knew that. So that's my call to action. If you look up Never Been Promoted, follow it. And we have lots of content that comes out, and maybe listen to a show. But that's all. Just take a look, then follow. All right, no shameless plugs. Mr. Cliff, coming live to the stage. It's Cliff Tooher.
Hello.
How you doing, Cliff?
Yeah, it's an interesting name, that's for sure. A lot of people.
Cliff is a very normal name. Cliff is normal. I know what you're talking about.
Cliff is normal. Just don't call me Cleveland. No Cleveland, please. Actually, I had somebody once call me that when I was in radio, and I said, no. We don't do that. A long time ago, when I was studying and went into the radio business during my what we call a work term, went to CJAD and CJFM in Montreal and did my work term there. And one of the guys actually called me Cleveland, and I said, no, don't do that. Cliff is fine. Tooher, yeah. A lot of people get a lot of, they go like that a little bit, and they go, oh, and then they get it out of your system, and then we move on.
Well, but if someone calls you Cleveland, they're just not listening. They're just ignoring your name at that point. I mean, no, it's like, hey, Tammy. No, my name's Thomas. It's not even on the same planet. I get it. People go to me like, is your name, do you go by Thomas or Tom? And I'm like, I introduce myself as Thomas. Everything says Thomas. And it's not that I don't expect it. I don't take it as rude, but I always answer with, I go by Thomas because I try to be as pretentious as possible to offset my charming personality. But I'm thinking, when people present their name as Thomas, or they've written it as Peter, I go with what you wrote.
Yeah. I
actually had somebody one time say, I'm offended you called me in an email, David, because only my mom called me that. And I have a customer named Dave. I'm not talking about you, Dave, another one. And I had never met this person, but I just replied like, hey, hello, David. He was so offended. I was like, well, don't sign your signature in email, David, then.
David, yeah.
The AI doesn't know.
I never usually use my full name, which.
Oh, you froze. We have a frozen internet situation.
But no, I use short form Cliff all the time. So,
the internet is freezing. We have a little technical challenges here on this live stream. So it catches.
There we go. Sorry about that.
We're back.
We are.
You're back. That Canadian internet, it's different. But if you guys were states, if you were the 51st state, that wouldn't happen. pause, and the internet's going to make this joke even worse. Are you there, Cliff?
Hopefully that will. Oh, sure am. Hopefully that will stop.
If it doesn't, we'll have to just go reshoot it, and that's what happens sometimes. I was making the joke.
Okay, I
Can
think
you
we're
hear me?
stable now. Yeah.
Are we? We stable? It doesn't tell me if it's you or me. I'm just going to blame you because it's easier to blame you. Still having little challenges. I'm not sure how to correct that. Hey, it's a live show, people. This is what happens. I'm not sure if it's me or our guest, but any good narcissist blames the guest. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm not even sure if Cliff can hear me at this point. The whole goal is to get him to laugh. And when he comes back on and he's not frozen in the frame that he's in. Oh, he's back. I was blaming you. Did you
Yes,
hear all that?
I am so sorry about this. I don't know why it's doing that.
I blame Canada. There's a song about that. Blame Canada.
Yeah, that's
Blame
from
Canada.
South Park.
That's right. What is it?
But we're not the 51st state.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, what will happen is, right, the Quebec region is out. They're not going to join. Everybody else will.
Right? No.
British Columbia is in for sure. Ottawa region. What is that? Oh my God, it's just there.
Well, I think the regions that might consider it are Alberta and BC, like mostly the Western, but Quebec for sure no, because of the culture, and the Indigenous will not, because the Indigenous, the way they work with treaties and such, it's with the Crown. So all the treaties are with the Crown. They're not with the government of Canada.
Well, so, if anything, the U.S. does a great job dealing with natives.
Yeah, yeah. But
this is so off topic of what we're going. I mean,
yeah, totally.
Now you're in Montreal.
No, I'm actually in Hamilton, Ontario, just a little past Toronto.
Okay, Toronto. I think Toronto would cave in a second. By the way, Quebec City is definitely out. They are like no.
No, yeah,
they're not even speaking English here.
Like that. Yeah, they're totally francophone there. Yes.
I went to Montreal this summer. Very pretty city. I've been to Toronto. Toronto's a cool city. Anybody who's not gone to Toronto or Montreal, two cities you might want to go check out. They're very actually. Go in July. August is recommended.
Don't come around this time of the year, you'll freeze.
Freeze. Absolutely freeze, unless you're from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or parts of Fargo. You'll not get there. Do you want to take a minute now that we've gotten through the technical challenges a little bit? Do you want to introduce yourself? Just take like a few minutes to talk about you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So, as Tom noted, or Thomas, I should say, my name is Cliff, and Tooher is the last name. And basically, I am a professional call center representative by day and content creator by night, if you will. And what I do is I have three different things that I do. I'm a blogger. So I have a blog called Candid Conversations. It's at one-on-one candidconversations.blogspot.com. And it's actually one, and then the word on, and then one, so numbers. candidconversations.blogspot.com. I also run a video channel on YouTube, which is called Candid Conversations Zoomed In and Comments video channel, which features interviews like the one we're doing today, and commentary, which basically has been switched over recently to something called Jats to Pack Chat, which is basically going to be a little bit of interesting facts for people, small, short videos. And finally, my podcast, which is called Tales from the Cube. It's found on Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast. And that's about call centers and what we do in call centers and how it works. So if you've never been in the call center industry and you want to find out a little bit more, check out those episodes that I have on the podcast at Spotify. And I think you'll find them very interesting and very informative. And that's what I do. And right now, still really in the stages of development, and hopefully soon there's going to be engagement with a party to basically go into the next level for the YouTube channel, especially, which is going to be monetization. That's where we're headed. So I've been doing this for a while. The blog started way back in 2009, and the YouTube channel about a year or so ago, and the podcast same amount of time, about 6 months ago, and all of them are doing well. And as Tom and I will discuss, or Thomas and I will discuss, it's going to be basically where we got to and why we're going there and so on. And I'll happily share some insights as to what to do if you're going to do any of these things, because it is interesting to do, particularly interview blogs or interview YouTube channels. There's definitely a lot to think about before you start in on this. And particularly if you want to do a niche podcast like mine, you really got to know your stuff. So
Yeah.
um, my advice is first and foremost, do the research. That's the most important part. When
Or
you
live it, right? Because like I just got back from Podfest. One of the most niche podcasts I heard about was about raising goats, and it does really well. Like tens of thousands of downloads a month. And I'm like, are there that many people who that's amazing to me. I was blown away by that
Mhm.
number. And, and the lady who runs it she's very, she's funny. Like, she's like, like we have goats and some names. And, and you're right. But I actually think doing the research isn't enough. You're, and I mean that big from, I mean, we can argue the point or discuss it. I don't think it's enough to do a podcast on, because you have to have what I would call a fusion reactor, not even a nuclear reactor, but a fusion, like a sun that
Mhm.
never runs out of content ideas. And if you have to do the research to be an expert in it, you could outpace your content to add value, because at some point you might repeat yourself, it might come out flat, vanilla. Uh, if you've lived it, so you
Mhm.
could do one on call center all day long because you live it. Like you could be like, oh my God,
That's
here's a
right.
story. Here's another thing. Now this is a very small thing when this specific example happens and they have this kind of tone, or you could get into the weeds endlessly with that because you live that life.
That's right.
If you're
Yeah.
doing it because it's just a passion project, you got to consider that as part of your strategy. So maybe talk about that, because I coach people on when they want to do a podcast. You have to have this fusion reactor. You have to.
Oh, you're right about that. The fusion reactor, as you pointed out, is the thing. And you're right. It's the experience. I've got 20 years in the call center industry. So I know how this works. I even, one time I was in a bit of a battle with one of my managers, and he and I were talking about stats and stuff. And he said, well, uh, you know, I could let you go because of this and this. And I said, yes, I know how this works. Believe it or not, I've got 20 years in, sir. I could even, technically speaking, do my boss's job, if not my OM's job. He was not happy when he heard that. But the truth is, yeah, I could possibly be an OM. I could definitely be a TM, which is a team manager or team lead. But that's because I've been front line for 20 years. I've seen how it works and I know how it works. So a lot of what I do does actually come from my experiences in it. The research part, though, is making sure I've got the information truly correct, or to find other things that maybe I didn't realize. Like recently doing a podcast on the call center analyst. Now, I don't really know that job very well, so I had to do a bit of research on it, but I know they exist. I know those are people that look at the stats and how the technology is working, and they come to us, or they should be coming to us to talk about that. And I talked about that in this podcast. But I also take a lot of personal experience, like what should you do on a phone call if somebody's being racist with you, or that sort of thing. I've done that. How to avoid awkward situations. In one podcast, I talked about dating in a call center, and it's not a good idea to actually do that because you could get into some serious trouble. But these are all things that I have experienced and done, and I now bring that to the podcast. And a lot of it is personal knowledge, but there is some also backing up with information from different sources to make sure it's right.
And you see, you have three things that are going on. And a lot of entrepreneurs have multiple. I call it the entrepreneurial ADD.
Mm,
It's not ADD. It's even worse. It's like money goes behind it. So ADD, you can lose your focus. Entrepreneurial ADD costs you money, gets you buying in a direction. You have three things at least going on that you mentioned. Maybe talk about, first of all, do they work together? And if they do or don't, just talk about the three and how they either work together or don't work together, or what purposes they serve for you or business.
So basically, the three different channels are the two are basically brother and sister, if you will, or brother and brother. Candid Conversations, the blog, and the YouTube channel are really basically a split. So what happened was when the podcast, not the podcast, when the blog was created in 2009, it was strictly just interviews with people. I would send an email out to persons after reading a what do they call those press releases? Thank you, press release. And what I would do is send a request, get it back, reach out to the person by email, confirm they want to do it, send out my questions, get them back, edit them, make sure they're okay grammatically, and post them up. Eventually, I started adding in other little things to see whether or not it would suit the blog and whether the numbers would go up or down or what. Some things worked, some things didn't. So eventually, what I started to do is add in comments. What has happened as the blog has emerged and grown is that I've realized that, you know what, people really want to hear the voice and see the face of the person. So I separated out into the YouTube channel to do interviews like the one we're doing today, because there's more color and nuance in seeing the face and hearing the voice. You get the tone. Whereas in writing, it's a little hard sometimes to see what's going on, to read between the lines, to understand tone. So that said, I separated it, and now the blog is just going to be a commentary, more or less. Well, the YouTube will be the main emphasis will be interviews, and doing an interview blog is really challenging because one, you have to find people who will basically engage with you, and that's not always easy. When I send out stuff, I don't always get a response. I mean, 2 or 3 times or 4 times I'll send out, nothing comes back. I hear crickets, and I don't usually go 3 or 4 times against a PR. I don't keep submitting the requests because if they're not writing back, there's a couple of things that might be going on. They might have somebody looking at it and saying no. There might be an algorithm that's weeds out stuff and so on and so forth. So when I do get something, I do the research, do the backstory, uh, look up as to who they are and what they're about, and then I call on them and basically say, "Hey, I'm interested in what you're talking about here. Let's go forward and see if we can't do an interview." And then we get together and we do that interview. I try to keep it within 15, 20 minutes, and it's usually never edited because I
Yeah.
want the full conversation.
Well, and we do the same. So that's why we do them live, because it's purely like, well, you don't edit. I'm like, we haven't in 360 some three shootings. We have not edited any of it.
Mhm.
It's a style of interview too, right? It's not that we couldn't. It's just they're too long, honestly, to edit. And no one says anything so stupid that I'd be like, we need to cut that. I've probably said something. Just early days. Hopefully, no one heard it. Uh,
Right.
but it sounds like your three things work together in content. I know when we do an interview, we do an interview article, digital magazine cover thing, and we have a really good AI that takes. I mean, it's a long prompt that takes keywords of what you're doing, what we said, and writes a whole article. It inserts the YouTube link, it inserts the podcast link. In the future, it's going to start relating other interviews that were similar and say, hey, we also talked about this in this interview. So you're doing what I think you're kind of like where we're going with it, which is you use that content multi-purposed.
Yes.
At the end of the day, though, you're creating content. What's the business goal for it? Like, or is there one?
Well, obviously, we want to monetize eventually. That's the goal. But the goal is basically to encompass a wide variety of interests and tell the stories of people and entrepreneurs, book writers, movie stars, and even producers. I mean, one time I even reached out and had a really cool conversation with a guy who does um, interesting work with tattoos. He's an excellent tattooist. One of my favorites, though, was an interview with a documentary creator who did The Last House Standing. Excellent video about what's going on with regard to weather and how it affects the construction industry, particularly in the southern US, when hurricanes and such come in and it wrecks houses and all that. So these are interesting information points. I stay away from things like dealing with, if I can say it, Donald Trump. No, you're not going to see stuff like that. I'm not going to touch that. That's already being handled by somebody else. I try to stay in a different lane because the mainstream stuff is already covered by traditional media or other podcasters or creators that I don't really need to go there. I don't want to
Yeah.
compete against them. I'm not interested in competing against them.
We
I want, yeah, I want to be different.
we try to stay away from polarizing topics, unless we're talking about magnets, and that's an attractive subject.
Totally.
I mean,
yeah.
Watch the viewer count just fall off now. Like, oh my God, did he just?
Well,
That's a dad. You know what a dad joke becomes a dad.
Yeah.
You know what a dad joke becomes a dad joke? When
I know what a dad joke is. Yes.
But it becomes a dad joke when it becomes apparent.
Yeah. Or yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna stop. All right, so you said you want to monetize it, and you have a full-time day job, right? To do stuff. What's kind of holding you back? What's the tie you need to cut to get there?
Well, at this point, there's no real tie to cut. What I think I need to do is find the right source to get that monetization going. Right now, thankfully, I do have somebody who's presented an interest in doing that with me through BeFly, which is an organization that does video promotion. They're quite good. The one good thing about them is that anytime you submit, you do get hits, and they're real hits. They're not fake. You got to be careful with the YouTube algorithm, because if you mess that up, you could get kicked off, and you don't want that to happen to yourself. So I've teamed up with BeFly right now. Looking to see about starting a plan to mobilize into the monetization phase, but I still need to make sure that I do it slow enough so that it doesn't look odd to the algorithm. And that's the thing; it's a process. So once I'm sure and I'm ready and I have a bit of money behind me, I will go forward and access that particular feature with my my account manager, and basically we'll go forward and start to do that, and hopefully see some things. That's a key thing with any of these three things. You got to have some sort of advertising to keep you going. Word of mouth is the absolute first one, but you still need to track in with some advertising. That's very important.
Yeah.
So you need to find good partners to work with, and I found some really good people to do that with.
Yeah, it's great. You should share me a link. I'll put it out there for them.
It's vefly.com, VEEFLY.com, vefly.com. They're very, very well known, and they're legit. You'll see they're actually all over the place. They've got a lot of social media out there.
Yeah, and just from somebody who did advertising via YouTube for our channel, and we got to 1 million subscribers through advertising, not through buying followers. Don't ever do that shit. But like, if you advertise, you can get subscribers, you can get people viewing your content. I don't believe YouTube's advertising promotion puts it in front of the right people. It'll put it in front of people who will click it, but not specifically maybe the ones you want to click it. And we learned that we cut that engine off, like after, about as we were growing it, and we refactored it to be like, hey, let's really focus more US, this, or this. So hearing things like VFly and hearing somebody endorse for it or something else is good to hear, because it is kind of hard to find a legit advertising partner to get the right banner ads or whatever else in front of the right people in the right moment. And on podcast as well, I'd say 99% of the ad pieces are garbage. I would buy ads directly, maybe from like Lisbon, one of the people who are hosting, and they can actually put you on they can get someone to read in your show and be like, hey, you got to check out the, Candid Conversations podcast. That's a real ad. Probably
Yeah.
costs more, but it's legitimately going to go in front of thousands of people who are going to probably check out your show and say, hey, that's actually pretty good, or whatever. And so I do caution, and I think you're saying this as well. When you have money, you can't just put it anywhere. You got to put it to a real client that knows it. Maybe for you, how do you know though, VFly, it's a real view? Like how did you quantify that?
The quantification of that was basically the fact that the subscriptions I'm getting through them, which is through YouTube, because they are actually on, I'm sorry, Google Ads. They actually use Google Ads to do their work. So you're getting good subscriptions. You're getting good followers through that, and that's their main bread and butter is getting new followers. So that's important, and also likes and other things like that, even comments. But you are generating real people coming in, and they're pretty steady. I mean, they're sticking around. They're coming back for more stuff. So, but the other thing too, once you do that, you got to start also making sure you continually put up good content. So you don't want it to sort of just fade in the background, like do one video a month. You want to try and do two or three a month if it's within your previews. Although this month's been a bit slow for me. The idea is just to basically put more put more really good content up and use that mechanism to do that. But also, if you can, every now and then, just put up a video without any advertising, see where it goes. Because if you have people coming in and looking, they're going to click on that, and what will happen is the algorithm will generate more and more impressions, and you'll get some other ticks on your other content in there.
Yeah.
For the podcast itself, I don't actually have an agency or anything like that. Usually, what I'll do is I'll go on to Upwork, and I'll hire somebody to basically post an ad for me, and they'll run that, and that's how I get more downloads and listeners onto the Tales from the Cube.
Are you tell me about some metrics you have for your YouTube channel and your podcast then?
What's that?
Some of the metrics, like, so how's it grown? What's the current downloads? If you want to share that kind of stuff. So just
At
so I can
this point,
gauge, the user can gauge kind of how effective that is in their.
right now we're over 30,000 um, for the channel itself. It's done really well, about 30,000 views or more, which is really really fantastic. The biggest one was a video that I had a special ad done for it that kept rolling over, and it was for a woman who rents out chickens, and it generated a lot. She's got on her video alone over three or close to 4 or 5 thousand views, something in that range. I'd have to look again to see what it is, but it is remarkable how well that video has done. But generally speaking, I range within anywhere from 400 to 1,000 views per video, depending on what I put up and whether or not I'm using VFly or just leaving it alone. Usually, I find the lower numbers are when I don't put any advertising up. The higher
Yeah.
numbers, of course, because of the advertising. So
I
that's
mean,
how it works. But yeah, you want the word of mouth stuff too.
right. You have to get it in front of people. I think one of the lessons, even like Alex Ramosi says, listen, no one knows who you are. And you got to market more. That's what they say. And so advertising is part of that. It's content, since you're doing blogs, you're doing some YouTube, you're doing some podcasting, it's a trifecta: written, video, audio, right?
Yeah.
You just got to keep
Otherwise,
pushing forward, right? Yeah. What's the future for you? So like, what's next? What's going on? What's your kind of goals? You fast forward a year and you look back, what are you proud of?
retiring. That's the goal. I've been in the call center industry 20 years, as I mentioned. I'm done. I mean, my brain is cooked. I mean, and I'm noticing that in our industry, particularly, and I'm sure Thomas can speak to this as well. There's been a real uptick in negative behavior from customers on the phone. In fact, the client I work for has actually had to put on a message saying, hey, you got to be kind to the advisors because they're trying to help you. So when you have to start doing that, there's a problem. And we have a real problem in customer service right now with aggressive, angry customers who just are saying things that are just absolutely horrific. So I'm at the point where it's like, you know what? Uh, I just turned 62. Today actually is my birthday.
Happy
Um,
birthday.
Thank you. And I'm coming to the point where it's like I'm done with that. So my goal actually is to become a professional content creator, and maybe also I might go into social media in the sense of being a person who would guide people on how to use it. I'm considering taking a college course on how to do that, how to be a social media promoter and use the different tools of social media to bring businesses more more customers and level up. That's the goal. Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I'd like to do.
that'd be great. I mean, like, um, what kind of traffic are you getting on your blog right now?
Blogs really done well. I mean, it is exponentially growing uh, by the year. I mean, we started out with a couple of hundred in the first year, and now we're up to usually about 19, 20,000 views in a year. So we are really, really,
That's cool.
really excited about it. It's just growing. And here's the funny part, Thomas. Sometimes I don't even put an article up and I still get 4 or 5 or 600 views on nothing really. It's just on previous articles. Once I put an article up, it goes to Blog Pros, which is another group I use, and they send it out. That's like they're like my social media managers, if you will. And what they do is they send out the information to get likes and responses on LinkedIn and Facebook. So they do that for me. So they basically manage the social media side, and that's how I get the hits. But it's great. I mean, it's a good thing. Of course, these are all paid subscriptions and such. So again, it's putting your money in a safe bet that because there's a lot of, as you pointed out, a lot of trash out there. You can buy something, and before you know it, you've got yourself in a bit of a bind, particularly with YouTube, because you get a strike or two, your channel's pretty much going to get ripped off the platform. You don't want that to happen. So I would say to anybody out there, if you're going to do anything like that, any kind of advertising, choose wisely because you're you're really going to be in a pickle if you make the wrong choice. You can spend money and you could get negative return if you do it wrong. So again, it's about the research as far as that goes,
Hmm.
but also making sure um, that you know your stuff. You whatever you're going to bring in any kind of content creation should be from you. It should not be from magazines or stuff like that. It's your personal experience that you want to bring to the table. And that's why, for example, I do Tales from the Cube, which is the podcast, because it's my personal experience. The the interview blog is more interest in different people and my radio broadcasting career. I loved doing interviews. It was fun. I used to be a DJ spinning music, but I really enjoyed doing interviews. I had a show about disabilities and I did interviews with people. I found that more interesting than spinning tunes. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the blog. It comes from my broadcasting side.
Yeah, I still think you could DJ like when you come on, you're like, like
I cannot
like you
beat
turn around from
Austin.
your turntable and you're like, all right, let's do this. It's Cliff,
Well, I think a DJ Blind Mice or something like that might work. I don't know. DJ Four Eyes. But
DJ Nine Eyes.
DJ Nine Eyes. Oh yeah, yeah. There you go. Um,
Why Nine Eyes? Because no one else took it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was a fun career, but here's something for anybody who wants to do any kind of broadcasting, which is technically what I'm doing. Um, traditional radio is not the place, particularly in Canada.
Right.
There's only
Anywhere.
about, yeah, anywhere really. Radio is really struggling. And going to school, and I know my friends, they're going to say, "How dare you say this?" But you're just wasting money going to these colleges and doing this. That's one side I think of, but the other side I realize, wait a minute. You could take that learning about how broadcasting works and do what I'm doing right now, and actually create your own content niche just by doing that. But if you think you're going to be working here, say for example, in Toronto on Q107, no, because most of the people sitting in the chair, they're not leaving. They're not going anywhere because they know once they leave, that's it, game over.
It is, and I think radio's dead. I mean, this is my take on radio. Even on some talk radio, that's just 35 out of the 60 minutes is ads to some
Yeah,
level. It's either read in or it's played. And the music channels, it's the same dozen 18 songs over a 2-hour, 3-hour period. It's just like, why do I even need that? I have Spotify. I can play all the music I want. I don't need the radio in my car. I can connect it. I mean, I think radio's in real trouble in the current format they're in.
yeah, because they're
100%.
still thinking that back in the 1950s.
I don't know what they're thinking, but like, I don't know who pays for radio ads because it's all lawyers right now.
Pretty much.
Lawyers and pharma.
Well, the other thing too with radio, if I may expound on
Of course.
this,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
when you're on the air, basically, all you're doing is something like this. Well, there's another 20 minutes of nonstop rock. We're going to come back with another 20 minutes of nonstop rock. It's 9:05, and you're listening to XYZ radio station. That's it. You're not getting much else. Maybe the weather, maybe a funny little bit. And then when you're playing the music, if you've noticed, after maybe 2 songs, they're telling you what the call letters of the station are, like Rock 97 or whatever. I'm not stupid. I know what station I'm listening to. I don't need to hear it after 2 or 3 songs. You can wait 4 or 5, maybe 6 songs to do that, but they don't. And it's insulting to me
It's
as a
repetitive.
listener. That's why I've tuned out of radio for a long time now.
If you put me in Home Depot on a Sunday when they're stocking shit and all I hear is beep, beep, I just want to run out of there. Right. I'm like, just why do I have to hear this beeping noise endlessly? This is what radio sounds like to me when they do that. It's just like it's a constant repetitive beeping noise that's irritating that makes me want to leave.
Yeah.
And when you apply that to your business, if you're doing this with your content, if you're being too repetitive, if you've got too much of a beep in your content, meaning like people are going to run from that. And that works audio. If I keep seeing the same shit over in visual, I get rid of it. And if you read the same kind of nonsense over and over, you stop reading it.
Yeah.
So I think that metaphor may work, but anyway, I hope you can go full time. So what's the plan? 2025. How do you go full time content creator? Do you do it for other people? Is that one way to take a step?
I'd love to do it for other people. Anybody who wants to reach out to me can email me.
Plug time. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Go for
it. You can email me at candidconversations@hotmail.com, and I'd be happy to do your content, to write for you, like an ad, to write your blog, maybe to interview you on the channel, get you out there. And, if you want to sponsor some of the commentaries that I'm going to be doing on the blog, we'd love to do that. Even if you want to do a sponsorship on one of the interviews, if you want to sponsor one of those, we could certainly set something up. I would be so happy to have businesses reach out and say, hey, can you do an interview with me? Sure, no problem. And set something up, and maybe we can do some collaborations and see maybe also there's possibilities to some business partnerships down the road. My hope is that within another year or two, I will be retired and fully up and running, working my business. That's what I want to do. But
not retired. It sounds like work optional.
Work optional. You got it. Work optional.
And most people who are entrepreneurs in spirit don't actually want to retire because they know they would just be bored out of their freaking mind. Like they would be like, golf is fun, but even much as I like golf or fishing, I couldn't do this shit every day. I'd be like this. I need something else. I would need another angle in life. So I think the idea is to have your own income source, no asshole bosses.
Well, I've had a few in my
That's
time.
the number one motivator of most entrepreneurs initially is I'm sick of
Yeah,
working for people. Yes.
yeah, and I think the essence of all of this is basically if you're going to do anything and start, particularly working in the broadcast medium, which is really what this is, you got to know what you're doing, but also what niche you want to be fit in. So, for example, I looked at in the podcast realm, are there other stuff, other pieces out there, other podcasts about call centers? There are not many of them, but there are. So there is some competition there. So I had to make myself unique. Um, but most of these other ones, they're basically talking about customer service and more driven into that, whereas mine's a little more broader. I focus on all the parts of it, and mainly the call center point. And one of the things that I try to do also, even in the podcast, is speak to managers. Hey guys, you might want to listen to your front line, and here's why, and different subjects matter for them to
I mean,
consider.
you have an expertise in a call center. I mean, there's lots of companies in the space, and the best way to get a job is walk to walk, right? So, when we meet people on LinkedIn and I get a meeting with them through, they're like, what do you do? I'm like, well, how'd you get here? And they're like, oh, it's like, that's what we do. And so for you, you could write an article that does something, talk about, and you maybe mention a few companies you want to work for. And then you share, say, hey, listen, wrote this article recently about you guys. This is when I featured you. If you'd like to share it on your, and then you get the marketing person like, oh, great. Thank you so much. Especially if it's done in positive light. And, you write it and you show them as the example, then you write another and you show another company as the example. And you share with their marketing. I'm pretty sure they'll reshare it. And you're like, hey, listen, this is what I do. I write content that and I have a podcast. Do you
Mhm.
guys ever if you're, would you be interested in working together so I could write some content for you? Because I know the space, I live it, and I blog and write about it, but I actually work for companies to help them improve that's all you would need to do. And you'll find companies to say yes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other
I mean,
funny thing,
that's how I would monetize day one, because then you have it, because you have the expertise, you already have the channels, and you win them over by giving them an article that.
yeah, well, you show them what you can do, and then you say, okay, well, here's the here this is what I've got for you. I'll give you a test article. You like it? Great. Let's see if we can do some more.
If
And
they
let's
say no, which is okay, you just make it, this is the worst fucking company on the planet. I would change the
just
tone
move
of the
on.
article.
You move on.
No,
It's
I'm
just
kidding.
like,
Don't do that. Don't do that. Get to never split the difference, right? Chris Voss. You can get them to a no too. Would you not?
mhm,
Would you not? Do you not want to have your a company in great light? Like, of course, we reshare this then, right? And so using your techniques to get it. I see a way for you to monetize quickly,
mhm,
really quick, because then you can talk about cool things people are doing on their podcast, on your podcast, in the space, in the commercial area you work, and why that's important, why that was good, and
mhm.
you're. I think I think with the Podfest, right? And I told you, I don't know if I told you this. I've been on a few shows today, so I can't remember if I've already said this or not. So if I have repeated this, sorry, but I think it's interesting. The goats, the podcast around goats. Did I tell you about this? Have I said this in the
Yeah, at
show?
the beginning, yeah,
Okay.
that was
I
a good
did.
one.
I'm pretty sure I did. If that person can niche content, your content creation around call centers is a no-brainer, because there's huge companies doing this. There
Well,
are
there's huge
people like
projects.
you
Yeah.
could talk to about, oh my God, let me tell you a story. The stories of content centers, it could be, am I the asshole type of a story? Like, you know, like you have, like, I see that as like fun. Am I the asshole? And you can just bring on other call center managers and people who run frontline and like, okay,
Mhm.
here's the scenario. And then you talk through, okay, you were kind of the asshole there a little bit.
Yeah, I'm also willing to do that. If there's a manager out there in the call center industry who wants to talk and do an interview on the podcast, hook me, hook in, send me an email. We'll definitely hook up and we'll see if we can get you on the show, because
There
I
you go.
think it would be beneficial to hear from them too. Because after a while, yeah, I have a nice, sexy voice, but let's face it, it would be nice to hear other people too, because having confirmation of what you're saying is also good. And by
Yeah.
connecting with other people, doing a collaboration, that basically uplifts you and gives you that credibility. And that's another thing too. You want people to recognize you and to give you credibility. That's important. That's really, really critical.
Agreed.
You
That's
know?
right. That's right. That's right. All right.
Yeah.
To get a hold of you, I think I misspelled the email the first time because I like to do tie-ups. That's typos with
So I'll
misspelling.
spell it out. It's candid conversations. That's CANDID conversations of plural CONVERSATIONS at hotmail.com. Send me an email. I'll be very happy to engage with you. And we can do some collaborations and other things too. We can talk about what you would like to do. And here's another funny thing that I used to do. Believe it or not, and I have done a few of them, is obituaries. I've actually written those too. Very, very complicated work because you're trying to tell the story of somebody who has died. That's also something I do. And it's um, it's interesting because you have to make sure that you get it right there too, especially when somebody has died. It's not something you fool with. So um, I've done that, and I actually one time got somebody to send me a request. I thought they were jerking me around. So I said, okay, I'll run it. So I send it back to them, and I checked the person, and I said, my eyes just bulged out of my head. A prominent doctor in the Arab world, I think he was in Dubai. That's who that obit was for. And the person wrote back and said, thank you, you did a great job. So it's those kinds of things. I really am into content and stuff like that. Even doing that, it's really interesting and challenging. But again, as Thomas pointed out earlier, got to have that furnace, that fuel, to rocket into this, and all the other things that we've talked about today. These are key things you want to do.
Awesome. I appreciate coming on today, Cliff.
Yeah, it was great.
You're you're bringing it together. You're in the earlier stages of it, but there's definitely a path to make money there with your expertise in call centers and your the passion to create content, which a lot of people don't have. Some people do it because it's a necessary evil and they flame out. But if you like doing it and you have a professional expertise, you've lived you've been on the front lines. Those two things can be transposed into benefiting others in the industry that
Hmm.
don't want to do it or don't do it well. And like that's a LinkedIn search tomorrow and a couple of emails of,
For
hey,
sure. Yeah, I
I
have to
write
admit,
I
I
write for the
really been on
space.
that
I'm
one
in it.
too.
Here's my blog. Here's some examples. Would you guys like some professional, very focused writing on this?
Hmm.
That's overnight. That's easy. Your
Yeah.
interviews be am I the asshole? I'm telling you. Customer call center, contact center. Oh man. Call center's internal typically, right? Call center's more for like I call my IT department is usually how that's set up. Isn't that more accurate than a customer center, which is
So
more
there's two types of call centers. Generally speaking, the internal, that is a company call center, like for example, we'll say Apple. Apple has internal call centers, I'm sure, and then there are externals, and these are third-party companies like S&P Data here in Hamilton. They're a third party, so they are contractors, and basically companies like Rogers or Bell will go to them and say, "Hey, we want you to run a campaign." Now, it can be an inbound campaign or an outbound. Outbound is basically they're calling in, "Hey, do you want to buy something?" or a survey. And then the inbound, of course, is just that. It's inbound. It can be sales, it can be customer service, tech support, and so on. So there are two main categories: inbound and outbound, as far as that goes in call centers. But there's internal and external call centers too. So you really got four things going on: inbound, outbound, and external, internal. And the internal is are there's many of them, but there's a lot of contracting out too. So you might be calling a company and you're thinking you're getting the company. In reality, no. You might call, I don't know, IKEA, for example, and what you'll get is a person who's representing IKEA. They won't tell you they are, uh, but what they'll say is, "Hi, welcome to IKEA," and it could be somebody in an internal call center, but it could also be the external call center. So that's what I talk about is the internal and external call centers
Yeah.
out there, without naming names. Particularly my company, I can't really name them or who I work for, or the client I work on behalf of, because it's co-branding and we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're working as like almost a white label to them or something.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Candid Conversations at Hotmail, and that's HOTMAIL. Okay, not MLALE. Hotmail.
Hotmail.
They didn't really think that one through when they did that. Anyway,
I probably typed it wrong too.
it's like hotmail.com. Actually, don't go there. I don't know what that is. You're gonna get flagged.
It's Hotmail. It's a long and old story. Goes back to the days when it was just literally Hotmail. Now it's live, really. That's all it is. Yeah.
Thanks for joining me today, Cliff. I'm gonna put you in the periwinkle room here for a second. I'll be right back with you. Thanks so much. Hey, for anyone who got it this far today and has listened, thank you. We are on a mission to help entrepreneurs like Cliff. I want you to learn something from where he's doing. He's putting it together. He's got an expertise. He's still figuring it out, but he has a passion. He knows it, and he has a goal. He wants to be able to be work optional, or what he called retired, but truly just work for himself, not have a day-to-day boss, and be able to live life and enjoy it. And like it's a lifestyle type business he's trying to build and grow through. And I believe he'll get there because he's got the talent and he's got the passion of the mechanics to have to go do it. Simple action. If you're listening, even if you're watching, just follow us on Apple or Spotify. If you feel cheeky, leave a review that's positive, but at the very least, listen to some of the content. And I really appreciate you for being here. So until we meet again and listen again, thanks for listening. Get out there, go unleash your entrepreneur.